There we are. Oh, so the Rebbe listed a few unusual, very unusual things about the holiday of Purim. One of the most unusual is that one second. Very good. Okay. One of the most unusual things is that in the holiday of Purim, the holiday is named a not Jewish word. The word Pur, it says even in the megillah Esther, it says Pur hu hagaral. That Pur is a Persian word which means lots, like a lottery, like dice or something. Pur. So the holiday should have been called the holiday of Goralot. Why Purim? Why take a not Jewish word? None of that. We know that the holiday of Purim, the holiday of Purim, the holiday in the Megillah. I'm sorry, the Megillah of Esther doesn't have God's name. God's name is not mentioned at all. It's the only book in the whole Talmud, in the whole 24 books of Judaism, that there's no mention of God whatsoever. No, all of the others have a mention of God. The Rebbe said, okay, even more. Let's look at the story of Purim. The story of Purim was that the queen of the world was Esther. Mordechai was sitting in the gate of the king. The Jews were sitting really, really good. They were all invited to the meal of Achashverosh. And suddenly, all of a sudden, from nowhere, one day came this decree, which was the worst decree ever in the history of Judaism on the Jews, to kill all of the Jews in one day. There was no time to run away, and there was no place to run away. Achashverosh ruled over the whole world. So the logical thing to do was that Esther and Mordechai, they should have used their influence on the king. Mordechai, the Megillah tells us that Mordechai, before Haman made his decree, Mordechai saved the king's life. He revealed a plot to kill the king, and he told this plot to Esther. Esther told the king, and that Mordechai saved the king's life. He could have come to the king and say, Your Majesty, I'm one of your chief advisors. You should know that it was me that saved your life. I gave the information. And Esther could have sung, and I'm a Jew. And Esther could have said, Your Majesty, I didn't tell you, but I'm a Jew also. And she was the queen. And they should have done that. Right? And the Jews should have come to the king and made a big petition. We love you all. We all came to your meal, and we support you, and we're not making any trouble. Please rethink this terrible decree. But they didn't. What did they do? They fasted for 3 days because they realized that the whole entire story of Purim, as natural as it may seem, and things like this happen all the time, that all of a sudden some evil person stands up and makes this terrible decrees, that are going against the whole world. Just all of a sudden, stands up a Stalin and stands up a this. All of a sudden, they start making these terrible, weird decrees. As we can see in our days that this happens, right? The wrong person gets into the power, and all of a sudden he just, goes berserk, does what he wants. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. That's what happens. So it happens. But Mordechai and Esther realize that Jews are different. The Jews are different. If something bad like this happens, then they realize that it's because of the relationship of Jews with God. And all the other things are just secondary. Everything else in the world is of secondary importance. The main cause of the whole thing, right, the real reason for it, it's like a person that has measles, and he says, the problem is I have these bumps, I just paint them over. You have to get to the cause of it. The cause of it is the relationship between the Jews and God. They realized that somehow or other the relationship must have been flawed, that the fact that they ate from this meal was a big mistake, and therefore they said fast for 3 days. Everybody return back to your Judaism, return to your senses. And as soon as they did that, then everything all of a sudden turned around. Okay. Says the Rebbe, maybe we can think that all this is only talking about in a time. We did this yesterday, but we'll do it again. You might think that all this whole story, this wonderful story about Mordechai and Esther and praying to God and all the Jewish people repented, that maybe this is in the time when godliness is shining. God answered our prayers, right? But by the time of the exile, and especially now in our generation, come on, God is not going to answer us. That was biblical stories, back then. This is when did the story of Purim happen? 1,500 years ago. That was even before the second temple, where godliness was revealed over there. Then God did miracles. Then we had to rely on God. But now, when there's darkness, doubled and redoubled darkness. Is vibalt is the Eibishter, because God has made this darkness and this concealment, so that it must be real. I mean, if God made it, right? God put us into exile. We're not here by accident. As the hashpah milamaila from Minyan Gashmin, that all the physical things in the world were probably given over to nature, right? Back in the temple, there were big miracles, but now there's no miracles. Now it's all nature. Let's open our eyes and be realistic. Now we can't pray and do these things and fast, and the relationship between us and God, that's the main thing, and the whole world is just like secondary. It's just, says the Rebbe, it's not so. Of them comes the answer that even in the time of Purim, when was the time of Purim? They were between the first and the second temple. The Jews were in exile. They were scattered among all in the whole world. Und der Matzav, and the situation was and the situation we have now is also after all the miracles. That's where we are now. Like it says, it says even now we are the servants of Achashverosh. Even now, after the Jews back then, they scattered all over the whole world. They had their whole temple, and now they were so they were between the two temples. It was like they had the temple, they had everything, and it was all gone from them. So they were after so we're in the same situation right now. Even right now, we're the servants of Achashverosh. When Alpha became, nevertheless, then it was a big miracle, durach tzomos, by means of the fasting for 3 days and returning to God. And thus is the Horah. This is the teaching from the fact that the Yom Tov is called by a Persian name, a not Jewish name, Purim, Lashon Parsi, a Persian name. Uvos veist oiv the gezerah, and it also shows Pur were the things that Haman used in order to destroy the Jews. The lots, Haman wanted to know what was the best time to make his terrible decree to destroy the Jews. He didn't want to do it according to logic. He said, I'll just throw myself on fate. And he thought that when it came out on the 12th month, he was very happy. So these these were instruments that Haman used to try to destroy the Jews. How can we call the holiday on a weapon of destruction? The opposite of the good of the Jews. When Oich, therefore, that's the reason why the megillah says that's why the holiday is called with a Persian name and it's called with a bad name. Was in their megillah, in the megillah is nitdar megillah, why it's also not mentioned in a revealed way God's name. Some people say when it says Hamelech, where it says Achashverosh, it refers to God. But the fact is, God's name is not mentioned at all, which is unlike any other of the other 23 books of the Torah. Weil in them besteht their oiftu from Purim, because that's the whole, I would say, the novelty of Purim and the Megillah Esther. As das was Yidden seinen nit untergeworfen zu Chukia Teva, the Jews are not under the laws of nature. Is as nid blois, it's not only regarding their Torah and their commandments, zerenyanim ruchnim, spiritual things, lighting Shabbos candles and going to synagogue and Rosh Hashanah. No, vi hatzlacha, like also succeeding in learning Torah, was darf haben siyaita d'shmaya, was kum derech yira shamayim, like learning Torah, you have to have the help of God, right? That's where you need God. But the fact of the matter is not so. Jews, even when they're doing in business, when their mischar, if there's, and not even just when Jews do business with each other, they don't change their language. They can speak in Yiddish or whatever. Nor mischar versus a yid feared mit a nit yid. Even when a Jew is dealing with a non-Jew, the When moves to im reden belashen Parsi, and you have to speak in his language, Persian. And he always says halacha biyadua she'esav sonet Yaakov, and it's known that every non-Jew somehow or other down deep has either in potential or actual a hatred for the Jews. Is doch megillah? It's possible that the goy is zochen kennen. He can make against him verschiedene eitzes or tachbolas. He can do things against him, like Haman did. He threw lots, and he can even make a situation where then is da chashash. There's a worry as anstatt der manen shem shemayim, that instead of mentioning the name of God, maybe the non-Jew will mention his idolatry. As Kenner Dachman, a person could think, as Vibalt as the Goy is unter gewarfen zu, because the non-Jew, he is under the laws of nature. Und the Hashpa zum Yidden, and because the non-Jew, the non-Jews, they rule over the Jews, so to speak. In other words, where does our livelihood come from? From the American government, from the French government, whatever. And so therefore, Hashpa zu Goy, zusammen mit Hashpa zu Goy, therefore God provides for the Jews the same way as the non-Jews. Warum the handeln zusammen? Here we see we're doing business together. Is b'meila oich der untergeworfen zu teva. So both of us have to be natural. That's what a Jew can think. I have to be just like him. I'll act like him. I'll look like him. I can succeed. I can stand up on the stage. All the non-Jews clap for me, and I'll do what makes them happy. Oif them is a hurrah. From this in Purim it says, and Megillah Esther as oich be'ez, that even in the time when we are in Purim, Persian language, and Esther, God is concealed. Darf mer vesen, he has to know, as in them, that in this is da der mailam yatava, that a Jew, no matter what, even when he's in Purim and there's no name of God mentioned, and that the poor is a bad thing, and everything around them seems to be just natural, that there's no sign of God whatsoever, you have to know the Jews are different. Jews are above nature. They're poor. Is hura goral. That the poor, this instrument that Haman used to try to destroy the Jews, really it's a Hebrew word, it's a goral. The goral is above nature. And in them, Hester, Aster, from this concealment, double concealment, there is, what does the sentence say? Anochi, Haster, Esther. There is the Anochi, the essence of God. Was this Hecher from all Hashemos, which is higher than all the names, even from the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's why God's name is not mentioned in the Megillah, because in the Megillah is talking about a time when it's revealed higher than God's name. Therefore, when a Jew reads Megillah Esther, as from Haster, even the things which are concealed, right? Like nowadays, right? The Jewish people, terrible times we're living in, awful, terrible times. The corona and the governments are trying to force us, and the rabbis are all confused, and the doctors are all, who knows, bribed, or impossible to understand what's going on. You can't tell what the truth is, and anybody who disagrees with them gets put into jail, or they get fired from their job, or there's this. Right? There was just now in Israel, one of the big doctors, and he said that this whole thing, that this whole corona and thing like this, and the vaccines, that it's wrong, and we're dealing with the whole thing totally wrong. It's not as dangerous as everybody thinks, and you shouldn't take it. They fired him from his job. They fired him from his job. There's other people that they take away their license. You can't. That's you can't say the truth. Even if it's not the truth, you can't say what you think. You can't say. You're not allowed to say what you think. What's going to be, right? And there's things that are happening that nobody knows about, and they won't let you advertise it, and they're closing off this person, closing off the terrible things. The world is, what's going on, right? Look at the president of America, all these negative things. Says the Rebbe, listen, don't worry about it. You can never have a worse ruler than Haman. The worst ruler, you can't possibly imagine a worse ruler than Haman. Okay, Hitler, Stalin, but they're all dead, right? It's not, the Rebbe said it's not going to happen again like that. And Haman was much worse than Stalin or Hitler. They could only kill the Jews in Europe and Russia. So Haman wanted to kill all the Jews in the world. And he had the means to do it, and he had the okay of the king and everything. Much worse time. And the Jews were in a deep, deep exile. They had just been kicked out of, the temple had been destroyed. They had been totally uprooted from one place to another. The second temple, they were trying to build it, and that got stopped. So here we are, a terrible decree against all of the Jews at one time, worst thing in the world. Says, don't lose heart. Don't become trapped by the world. A person has to know that the Jews are always beloved by God. You have a lot of questions. I also have questions, but that's the fact of the matter. This is the time of total confusion, and total. But number one, we know we're Jews. Number one, the Rebbe is telling us that the essence of what it means that we're Jews means Jew is above nature. That's what a Jew is. And that's why it says that even the darkness, even now when the darkness is double, hastir astir, is laying there, but we still read, nevertheless, megillah Esther, the megillah. Megillah means to be revealed. From gilui. Val veis says, oich, they're poor, because he knows that even this poor, this instrument which was used by Haman, the most powerful person in the world, the instrument that he used to destroy the Jews, it was foolproof. So he thought, biz sum poor from Haman, the poor of Haman, which he threw these lots. But you have to know, in the end, it's the Goral. It's going to turn around to be really good, and more good than you could possibly imagine. That's why God is shaking us up so much, so that we'll know, listen, we can't understand what's going on. So you know what? Let's try to forget about understanding for a second. Just let's think about how God loves the Jews, also above understanding. You have all sorts of questions, forget those questions too. The questions also come from Amalek. The fact is that God said that he loves the Jews. The Rebbe, he's the Mordechai of our generation, is saying the same thing back there as Mordechai said. This alt says, Nitla Mafreya. Therefore, you have to know that the story of the Megillah is not back then. Like the Baal Shem Tov said, he explained what it says. If you read the Megillah backwards, it's no good. Don't read the Megillah like it's backwards. It's something that happened a long time ago. Nor it's by it's that is by the Jews now, and not just by the Jews, by you and me and every Jew right now. Then we'll come to the Tachlis Megillah, the ultimate revelation of the Megillah. And that won't be called Megillah Esther, but called the Megillah, revelation. Was bring to a simcha, tremendous joy that we just finished learning about. Yitzchak, Ata Avinu. Biz in an ofen from a way of Adalo Yada, in a way that's impossible to know. A simcha bilti mugbelet, a joy which is unlimited. Durach them, by means of this, is somchim geula legula, that we can put one redemption next to the other. There's a question in the Gemara, that sometimes there are two Adars. When it's a leap year, they call it a leap year, they call it a pregnant year. Shana Mu'uberet. So sometimes, in order to make the lunar calendar and the solar calendar equal, so that the Jewish holidays will come out at the right time, Nisan will always be in the spring, etc. So there's added on another month in Judaism. Like once every 3 years, it's added on another month. So that month is always the month of Adar. Adar. So in the month of Adar, there's Purim. So we got a question. When should we make the holiday of Purim? On the first Adar or on the second Adar? Well, logic dictates that we should make it on the first Adar, because the first Adar, the second Adar was the additional one. That's the additional one that we add on. The 12th month of the year is the first Adar. And on those months, those years that are extra, so there's a 13th month. So you think the 12th month is when you should make Purim. But it says no, the Gemara says no, that we want to somech geula legeula. We want to put the redemption, miraculous redemption of Purim on the month which is right next to the miraculous redemption of Passover on Pesach, which is on Nisan. So it says somech geula legeula. That's what it means. We want to make one redemption, but the Rebbe is saying in a bigger way. Not just as far as the holidays go or the day, but as far as real, true, infinite reality goes. That from the redemption, the miraculous redemption of Purim, will come to a future redemption. Versus bedugma to the geula of going out of Egypt. Now you have to understand something over here. which is very important about Judaism. And Judaism, true, it's based on Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their tremendous love and their work and their efforts but Judaism is a religion which is founded on miracles. It's founded on miracles. In other words, that God took us out of Egypt in the way that he did was a miracle there's no religion in the world even claims to make a thing like that. Like the whole entire nation, even in science fiction books, there's no, a whole nation that all of them were all slaves and all of them were, they experienced these 10 plagues and all of them went across the sea. God split a sea for them and all of them received bread from heaven and water from a rock. And there was one, and the Jews have been passing this story down, right? We're talking about hundreds of thousands, millions of Jews have been passing the story down from generation to generation for 3,300 years. And even if you want to say, oh, it's not true, they made it up. Well, there's no nation that made up such a story and they passed so many details. And they passed that. Either the Jews must be the most stupid nation in the world. I mean, there must be like real fools to believe this. And the rabbis must be like really bad guys to keep passing it down to us and keep, feeding us. But the fact of the matter is we know who the Jews are. The Jews, you're not going to fool them that long. It says you can fool some of the people all of the time and all the people some of the time. Well, that doesn't refer to the Jews. You can't fool all of the Jews even some of the time. No matter what. What's the example? Mount Sinai. All the Jews, God appeared on Mount Sinai after all these miracles. And 40 days later, they worshiped the golden calf. There's no better proof that God existed than that. Right? So it says the one time when all the Jews agreed was to the truth. That's when you can get all the Jews, was to the truth. It says right before God gave the Torah, all the Jews realized that it was the truth. Right after they got it, there was a little bit too much. They couldn't stand the difficulties, the tests that they were in, or that Moses wasn't there. Okay. And the other time was on Purim. All of the Jews were convinced, but it's not fooling them all the time. All of the Jews, if you want to call it, they became crazy for God. The truth. The first time in history that it happened, that's why it says that in Purim was the first time that the Jews really received the Torah, that they got, it says v'kimu v'kiblu, that the Jews got the Torah on Mount Sinai, but they didn't really get into their tishkas. They weren't really willing to sacrifice anything for it. They weren't willing to sacrifice everything for it. And on Purim, they were. Says the Rebbe, that's the point of Judaism. That was the amazing miracle that happened on Purim. That also didn't last that long, but at least it lasted long enough that we make an amazing holiday, and it's inside of each Jew eternally. It did last. It's inside of each one of us. That our job is to make it come out, and that we need God's help. We can't do it on our own. Can't do it on our own. Just like the Jews couldn't get out of Egypt on their own, so we can't get out of this terrible exile that we're in on our own. We need the help of Hashem. It's just too much. It's just too crazy. Too much heartbreak. But for sure, God will help us. No doubt about it. And even in a greater way than when we left Egypt. Judaism is based on miracles. Going out of Egypt, receiving the Torah. Judaism is based on, the going out of the future redemption by means of the Rebbe, Melech HaMashiach, is going to be even bigger miracles than going out of Egypt and receiving the Torah. It's the thing we cannot possibly expect. We don't, and that's what Chassidut deals with. At least we'll be prepared for this amazing, wonderful surprise that God is going to give us. What's done then will be Laila kiyom ye'ir. Night will shine like day. As oichter choshech, that even the darkness of the night of exile, vet lichten, will be illuminated. Like we said before, megillah Esther, the revelation of what's concealed. As oichter hester, that even the concealment will be revealed. But bias Mashiach Tzikenu, with the arrival of the Mashiach Tzikenu, Yavo v'Yegalenu Bekarov Mamash, now Mamash Yechi Adonenu Morenu Rabbeinu Melech HaMashiach Lo Olam Voed. And if you remember, yesterday we learned in the Torah Or, remember the Maimer Torah Or, right before it said that Amalek has to be destroyed totally when only if the future redemption comes at the last moment. But if the Jewish people return to the Creator, then even a Malek will be able to be transformed. Like it says that the king said to Mordechai, hurry up and take the garment and the horse and give it to, he said that to Haman, give it to Mordechai, give those things to Mordechai. In the future, it'll be joy and happy for everybody. Now let's do the Yom Yom for the day. 1 minute. Yeah, here we go. Yeah. Seems from the shop. There we go. Oh, this is what I had to do, right? I hope. Yom Yom Chabad. Good. Hayom Yom. Today is the 12th of Adar. Like we said, there's 2 Adar, so it goes. It is written, the gift of man makes room for him and leads him before the great. Some people have great wisdom. Some people have wealth. But the gift of man, namely when a person gives his man, the gift of giving your Adam, you give yourself, your humanness, you devote yourself to understanding, to strengthen Judaism, then not only will he make room for himself, going out of the restrictions and bounds of nature, but also he takes him before the great. His position will be superior even to those people who have money, who have wisdom and wealth and power. In the book of Vayikra, it says, Adam ki yakriv mikem korban lashem. It should have said, Adam mikem ki yakriv. It should have said, a person from you who offers a sacrifice. Why does it say a person who offers from you? So it says a person that makes an offering, a person wants to be closer to God. Yakriv means to be close, has to come from you. He has to bring the offering from himself. He has to sacrifice his own personal animal, his own desire for selfishness, which is called the animal soul. The three, listen, it probably does have a Kabbalistic meaning. I don't know what it is, though. I mean, maybe I could figure something out, I can tell you. But especially the Purim this year, it falls out on Shabbat in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem. Jerusalem celebrates Purim one day after everybody else. So they would call, they have a Purim Mishulash. They have a double, right? What is, how do they, I think they read the megillah on Friday, and they make the big meal on Sunday, and they change the prayers, and the reading of the Torah is on Shabbat. You can look and see. I think they read the megillah on Friday, and that's also when they give the gifts to the poor people. And on Sunday, I think they give the Mishloach Manos, and look it up in the law. But does it have a Kabbalistic meaning? I don't know. But I do know that the day after, in other words, 2 days, the holiday of Purim, the original holiday of Purim, was, we'll talk about this at 3. I gave a whole rundown of it yesterday, but I didn't press the record button. So I'll make a repetition of this today at 3 o'clock. We'll go over the whole thing, and maybe then I can think also about this Kabbalistic meaning. Look, I have some books to talk about it. We'll see. All right. Have a good day with Mashiach now. See you all at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, God willing.